called the money god. He was equated to the god. It's in the sense of not our Lakshmi. Our Lakshmi is a very responsible god. Here is a god which went about irresponsibly about money, and I will tell you how irresponsibly. It doesn't require much of economics to understand this irresponsible nature of economics. You know, from 23%, that is 21% is the US federal bank rate, they kept on cutting down the interest rate. Why they cut down the interest rate? Of course, it was a high interest rate. Such an interest rate could not have been maintained, because where in one country the interest rate is 10%, in another country interest rate is 4%, in one country the interest rate is 20%. The whole world gets destabilized, because the country which has the highest rate of interest will attract the greatest amount of foreign investment. And when it attracts that kind of foreign investment, the currency becomes very strong. That is how dollar became very strong. Why dollar had such high rate of interest was, dollar was backed by gold at one point in time till 1970. Afterwards, dollar had nothing to back actually. It's a huge history which I don't want to go into at this moment. And once the dollar ceased to be backed by gold, dollar became a paper currency, and the paper currency had to get acceptability throughout the world, which is only through the economics, politics and military power of America. And one of the instruments by which America provided enormous amount of strength and acceptability to the dollar is the interest rate. In 1981, when the interest rate was 23% offered by banks, only 5.6% of the American families had stock market investment. Just 5.6%. Because the interest rate was so high, there is no meaning in going to the stock market. Then they began cutting down the interest rate. This is where you must understand the foundations of modern financial capitalism was laid. When the interest rate came down to 8% in the year 1990, that is the bank rate, the deposit rate would have been 1 or 2%, 3% higher. In the year 1990, 25% of the American families got shifted to the stock market. In the year 2001, from 1981, 1990 to 2001, the interest rate is cut to 1%. 55% of the American families get into the stock market. Not only that, families put their savings in stock market, the retirement funds, pension funds, health funds, all the social security funds, they began increasingly investing in stock market, because the interest rates they were getting on bonds and other bank deposits were so low. They began shifting their investments. By 2001, 2003, 60% of the pension and retirement funds of $16 trillion. $1 trillion is today 49 to 50 lakh crores. You can understand what 16 trillion means. Out of that, 60% got invested in stock market. By 2001, there was virtually no distinction between American stock market and American economy. The confluence, the interconnection, the merger was so complete. If the stock market fell, the American economy fell. If the stock market rose, the American economy rose. You must understand the criticality of stock market in the American economy is entirely different from the role of the stock market in other economies. Take for instance 2 other economies which are very powerful economies, number 2 and number 3 economies. Take Japan for instance. You know, the country with the highest savings in the world is Japan. Their total banked savings is $12.5 trillion. This is cash. You know what is the interest rate the Japanese banks offer to the Japanese depositors? Can anyone make a guess? For a 5-year deposit, the Japanese offer 0.8% interest. If somebody wants to keep Go to the bank and say, you keep my money for 1 year. They said, you give me 1%, I will keep your money. You have to pay me to keep your money. It's a bloody responsibility to keep your money. You know what is the amount of money total Japanese savings kept in banks? 56%. And they could well have invested in American banks, Indian banks, Malaysian banks, banks in Europe, and got higher rate of interest. I cannot understand why the Japanese chose only Japanese banks in which they will pay money to keep money or get 0.8% interest and still will not interest at 10% or 5% or 6% in banks elsewhere. That's also a successful economy. And despite the fact that they were offering nil rate or 0.8% on 5-year deposit, with a huge surplus of $12.5 trillion, only 5.6% of the Japanese savings is invested in stock market. Just 5.6%. It's also a very efficient economy. Come to Germany. In Germany, only 7% of the households are linked to the stock market.